Hi again. So I'd like now to show you the part of the administrators of the single sign-on domain. So for your customers, how they will see it. So we have the domain created on the single sign-on section under the admin section, so that the domain is allowed by the owner of the instance, and we have assigned it an administrator. So I'm also connected with this user as an administrator, and now I can see if I have a single sign-on domain, I can see under account the single sign-on domain sections. Those are the domains that I'm allowed to manage and to configure. This could be someone from the IT and someone that can configure the single sign-on settings also on your domain provider. So we have here the Veertly.com, which is active, and the demo SSO.com that it's in draft and still needs to be configured. So you just create a domain on the admin section and you allow it to this user. This user will see this square here as a draft, and he can click. He can change the status once it's fully configured. He can also set the settings of the do not enforce single sign-on. This means that if this checkbox is selected, users with an email from demo.sso.com will be allowed to log in with their email instead of enforcing the single sign-on. By default, once the single sign-on is active, it will be enforced for all emails from this domain. But the most interesting part for your customers is the configuration of the single sign-on. For that, they can click here on the single sign-on portal, and this will open a new page in the WorkOS environment. The WorkOS is the tool that we are using to manage all the single sign-on configurations. And we have created previously, when authorized the domain on this instance, we have created on the WorkOS this configuration, and by allowing it to the organizers, they will be able to configure the settings of the single sign-on. It can use any of these identity providers, so they will be able to configuring it directly on their with their IT support with their identity providers. They can be Azure, Okta, Google, SAML protocol, or any other of the other ones. For example, if we click Azure, if you want to connect it with our Microsoft 365, for example, we can click Get Started, and then there's a step-by-step guide on how this configuration can be done. And you don't need to go back and forth with the customers to configuring it. And the IT personnel will be able to configure it, because there are also some special settings and the permissions that you need to have on the identity provider in order to fully configure it. If you have any issue on this configuration, don't hesitate to contact us, and more than happy to support. But with all these step-by-step guides, they will be able to fully configure it themselves. And that's about it. Once this is configured, you can set the domain as active, and the users will now start connecting and entering with the single sign-on that I will show in a second. Before going into how the users log in with the single sign-on and how this part works, I wanted to show, after having a final configuration of a domain done, how this single sign-on portal looks like for your customers. Here they will be able to, this is fully connected, configured. They can also test it themselves, the single sign-on, through this platform, through this tool, and you can see who connected when they have connected using this single sign-on, so you can have a better understanding how this works. They can also reset the connection and reconfigure it in case of need, and it's a full self-service portal for the administrators of the single sign-on domain. So now I would like you to show you how it looks like on the front end of for the users. So here I'm on the cockpit, it can be on an event and so on. We have the sign-in page, sorry, and this sign-in page, we usually have the sign-in with Google, sign-in with email, and now we have also had the single sign-on. Let's do it. For example, if I select the domain Veertly.com, this will allow me to enter with this domain because it's configured with a single sign-on. It's verifying, and it will automatically redirect me to Microsoft, and I'm automatically connected to this instance. Another alternative is that, for example, if you enforce the single sign-on with the domain, which is the one by default, so I can put my domain here. You can see that single sign-on is enabled for this domain. So instead of sending me an email with a link to login, it will also redirect me to the single sign-on. Okay, great. I hope this will explain how the single sign-on works for the administrators of the domains, but also on the login part of the attendees and how they will use the single sign-on. Any questions, just let us know, and as always, happy to hear your feedback. Thank you.